everyone. My name is Dennis Deacon. I'm the organizer of the Chicago Web Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup. Along with me are I guess that's right, Elizabeth Carpenter and Andrew Larkin. We started up the meetup right after the holidays to fill a need. Basically, we were looking for an accessibility meetup, and after several months of looking for one and didn't find one, we just started it, and we've grown exponentially over the last few months. We'd encourage you, if you're interested in the topic, to check us out. The one thing I want to say before we get started, two things I want to say. If you're the type like me who wants to write down everything you see on the screen, don't. Presentation is up on SlideShare right now, and we'll give you the URL, but it'll be fairly easy to remember. You can record that if you like. You can also record anything that we're saying that's supportive of this. The other thing I wanted to say is the format for today is going to be a little bit different. It's sort of a good representation of our mind meld, if you want to say. So I'm going to be covering some very high-level topics about accessibility, web accessibility, and then we're going to do a workshop. You're going to get your feet and hands wet, designing and did we decide what it's
we'll be designing
sharing a product, a document sharing product.
We have the requirements, don't worry.
Yes. Yeah, for a change, you'll actually have requirements. I know that's foreign to me. And then we're going to show a demo of a like product, show you the sort of the pluses and minuses accessibility-wise of that product. And then we'll sort of bring it all home with a summary of tangible things that you can do as soon as you get back to the office to make your sites or apps more accessible. So with that said, you're all fairly young. I'm not sure if you remember. How many of you remember when we used to see these on websites? Raise your hand. Okay, so a third to a half. This is very common, designing for a particular browser. Thank God we got away from it, because at one point in time we used to have to design the site 3 different ways. But the problem is that we're sort of still doing it, not for browsers, but for the populace. We're designing for the mainstream people, but we're leaving out a certain part of the audience. We're designing for able people, but not disabled people, and we really should be designing for all people inclusively. So what's web accessibility? And I want to be cautious. As I was preparing these slides, I'm a little bit torn about the word web accessibility, because then everyone says, what about mobile? What about apps? So really it could be digital accessibility. Eventually maybe we'll change our names, but until then, basically web accessibility is inclusive design. It's designing for everyone, not leaving anyone out. Typical disability types, visual, everyone, whenever you say disability, first thing you think about is blind. I attended a conference earlier this year, CSUN, and one of the most remarkable things that I walked away with is the fact that there's more people with poor vision than no vision. So, and that includes, say, color blindness. How many times have we designed a site that has clicked a red button? Can they see the red button? So, things to consider when you're designing. Visual, auditory. If you have videos or audio, do you have captions or transcripts? That also helps with SEO. Things to consider. Motor dexterity. First thing we may think about is maybe cerebral palsy or someone who's paralyzed. What about people with multiple sclerosis? People who maybe instead of a mouse they use a trackball and they can't exactly click on, say, a tightly designed bunch of links. I watched this one person that I know click on the wrong link all the time. So maybe the design is at fault, not the person. Cognitive. Cognitive is my new fascination. It's also the hardest thing to design for, to plan for, because, let's say you have 6 different cognitive issues, but it could manifest in millions of different variations. So it's very difficult to design for, to plan for. Take, for instance, autism. I know a person who uses a screen magnifier to get rid of all the junk and just to magnify on the content that they want to look at. So consider that. Seizure and vestibular. That's difficult to say. Seizure, it was funny because I was going to show an example of that. And then my thought was, well, what happens if I set off a seizure? So I said, okay, let's forget about that. But if you can imagine anything that flashes different colors and doesn't stop, that could very well cause a seizure. Do you want to send your website visitors to the hospital? Possibly not. We've probably all run across this on a daily basis, especially downtown. This is called a curb cut. And there's actually a bunch of different accessibility features to this curb cut. Can anyone sort of tell me some of the features of this for accessibility?
Well, the bumps, if you're walking, you can feel that that's different pavement, so you know that you're approaching the street.
Okay.
The street is pitched, be like an ADA ramp.
Okay.
I bet if you're in a wheelchair, those bumps make it easier to stop.
Correct. And obviously, if you're blind, you tell, the bumps. So same thing if any of you take Metro, that yellow strip has those bumps. So also notice that this is technically, although it's hard to tell here, the color is red. Red means stop. And of course, obviously with the crosswalk, we have these very bold white strips there. It's really removing the barriers, the curb where you have the 90-degree angle. It's removing the barriers to allow everyone to use this. Okay? And that's what inclusive design is all about. Assistive technology. How many of you currently use assistive technology? Raise your hand.
Oh, I do. For the mouse.
Okay.
I use a mouse.
Okay. How many of you are wearing glasses? Raise your hand. How many of you are wearing contacts? Raise your hand. I call those assistive technology. I can't drive without my glasses. That's assistive technology. It provides the ability to do something that I couldn't do without it. These are examples of typical assistive technology. Screen reader is the number one. That's primarily what we use. I would strongly suggest that you look into one of these other ones, because screen magnifiers are probably used more than screen readers. Check one out. There are some free ones out there. Just check them out and see how they work. See how someone might use them. Accessible website. So now we're going to get into WCAG. Does everyone know what WCAG stands for? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You'll hear WCAG. You'll also hear 508. These are the guidelines that tell you how your site is to be accessible and how it should be compliant. I work for United Airlines. The Department of Transportation has mandated that all airline websites must be WCAG 2 AA, there's 3 levels, AA compliant by a certain time frame. If you do a Google search on these guidelines, they tell you specifically the things you need to do, and they're basically grouped into 4 categories. Perceivable, so you should be able to perceive that something is there. So say, for instance, you have an image. How do you know that image is there if you can't see it? That would be perceivable. Operable, can you navigate a website without a mouse, just a keyboard? That would be operable. Understandable. This could very well be your content. This could be, let's see what else. If you're navigating just the links, are all the links, click here, or view more, view more, view more, or book now, book now. Okay, and robust, are there enough fallbacks to be able to use the site? Okay, so now, I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth. You're going to use your laptop? Or
Andrew's got the requirements.
okay, so now we're going to have a little workshop, and
Now we have some fun.
not what
No,
my
I'm sorry,
part
no.
wasn't fun. Okay, that's okay. Payback is sweet, you know.
We like it.
Yeah, we do. It's scheduled for.
So, as Dennis mentioned, we're going to do a little activity in which you're going to design an application for sharing files with other people. So you have files stored in the cloud, and you want to share them with coworkers or friends. And this is based on an actual product that I use, and I found some accessibility issues with. So we have our requirements listed there, and as far as we'd like, if you guys want to break into groups of like, what do we say, 4 or 5, 3, 4, like 3 to 5.
Right.
So,
And it might be obviously since you're all in rows, maybe we'll do it that way.
okay.
Okay.
So I don't know. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we've got some right here. These two, and then if you guys maybe want to turn around and you can have a group back there. Some of you guys might want to group around this side a little bit.
2 markers per group.
Yeah, I guess.
Sit here. Come around it all.
Let's see. We have some groups here. You guys want to turn around? You guys want to come and join some of the groups here? And feel free to flag any of the 3 of us down as we're kind of working through this. And you can kind of give you some tips. Let's see. So we have,
That'll make 6, but I think
so
they'll
we want to add maybe 2 over here. You guys have 2 down here. Lonely. And so we've got some paper and markers for you to use.
That's why we're calling it a meetup.
I'm Caroline.
Caroline.
Are you going to go there? Okay, then we'll be fine. That sounds good. Yeah, I know. Their snack room is way nicer than any room.
So why don't we have 4 in here?
Okay.
All right. Does everybody have something to draw on? So we're doing wires, basically. Simple and straightforward. What we've done here is we put together just kind of a list of just some base things that we'd like, whatever design you come up with, to touch on. We're obviously not looking for high fidelity here. Just kind of give a feel so you can be comfortable talking about how you might approach some of these problems, some of these use cases. And feel free to draw on experience that you have with other applications. And if you have any questions, we'll be floating around. But we'll take a little bit of time just to kind of give you guys a chance to talk to each other, kind of talk about some of the ideas that you might come up with, and then afterwards we'll maybe do a little bit of a show and tell.
Yeah. Anybody, if any team would be willing to share?
Yes. Pick your what would you call that? What do they call them with the jury? Your foreman. Pick your foreman, your lead.
So just, if you can't see it from the back, the app should allow people to users to upload files and download files. The app should allow the users to view the document content, search for files in the cloud, share files via an email address, and sort the files by type, size, modification date, kind of your standard sorting things. So.
Okay, get started.
And
go.
all right, to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We might have to layer on Siri recognition and voice recognition.
Wander around, especially for like the word
Yeah. Exactly. Send to my wife.
There's something wrong with
That's how you
it.
can share. Everybody's like,
Oh no, some of the other side.
Well, I think we first have to.
You're thinking, you know, because often I don't know what the file is. I don't know. Do a whole list of things.
So you've got a certain, so if you have a, so I guess starting, are you looking at a list of files that you need to search through, sort by, or are you looking at a blank page with just an option to upload and search? And then when you search, you need to list, right? I mean, why don't we start with that? Like, what does it look like to me?
Well, and then if you're visual, then
Yeah,
you
just
see
draw,
it.
you know, you're basically just
right.
Blind,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter what's on the page.
So,
You're not saying
so
it's
accessibility, you have to be blind to screen readers, right? And magnifiers. So for screen readers, everything has to be like tagged, so it knows how to read what each document is. You can put some metadata about it. And the screen reader would pick up like the alt tag on an image or some meta content and read it back to you. Because if you're looking at a screen, you're blind, right? You're not really looking at it, but how else is it going to be conveyed to you?
Depending on if they, the main.
So I think you need to see it almost like in a folder structure, because if you only had search, you'd be relying on recall. And I don't remember what that picture of my niece thing is. But if I saw a folder or
that could be different from what the So the user is interacting with it, moving switches around. But if you just go look at the screen readers and just start doing that, in some ways, yes, layout does make a difference.
What do you need? I gotta make like simple right got down search bar. Maybe like place an upload, browse and upload. Search through.
So you'd start with the sorting and you want to upload it.
We're talking about something that's like
Oh, you guys do it?
search on the Windows list of things, there's titles, there's a little description. I guess I'm coming from the visual picture first and then saying, okay, what do we have to do?
Well, how come you want first? You're right. Or figure that out.
Well, I think up and down is logical too. I mean, just never know.
It's hard for me to step out. It's very hard. What would it look like visually?
But then after that,
And then what do we have to do?
If anybody needs more paper, yes, let us know. Because I don't like to use heavy on my hearing.
It's important. You have to sit there for 5 minutes. It reads every single little
Where you need like skip navigation. Well past this. Yeah. Click an action. Big old ones.
That's a good point. That would be really.
Imagine how frustrating that must be.
Oh yeah. So if you have a list of 200 things, just consider it. Yeah.
It will.
That's what I'm saying.
If you don't have a way to skip past it, it will sit there and read sequentially through everything. It'll be sequential in the order that it's markup. It might not even be visual, depending on your markup structure.
You definitely don't want to hit them with the bills.
Yeah. Also can't use a mouse.
So that's where it's like, is there a way, it's one thing to start advice, whatever, you know, here's what I want to do, which is fine for things like change their sort order. Or
We got something like the area, whatever it is.
What happens is I don't know exactly what you want. I might not necessarily have an email address, but I probably know their name and that's how it's going to be. So I can figure it out.
Well,
right?
email them.
Show them.
Oh,
yeah. No, that's it.
Up or down arrows, side arrows.
Or I think it's
Space bar, and you can use it to keep it.
Yeah, I'm just
Don't
gonna
have to go for it.
how do I find out without having to sit there and have like listen to
So you can have a follow but everything. And it's got to be logical.
Because I don't like to stand there.
So,
I like to walk.
oh, that you can make these files.
You can't commit to it with nothing. You can't commit
Click
to
on
it
it, and it's
like,
got like a
I kind of know what I want, but I have no way to search for it. I don't even have a keyword.
Click on it,
I
and
can't
then
do a list.
the screen reader, if you're blind, will read.
But is there a way we can make the search happen without presenting a list?
You know, it's.
Of course you can give us one thing, I'm lots of things. I feel lucky. But is there another way to organize some other than putting on a list? So I don't know.
Yeah, Google gives the list very short and
Depends on the
large paging. So that's kind of ways to use it. Don't have infinite scrolls or something like Facebook. So we have a very short list number of pages.
But we do use Java.
I could say, for example, nephew. And if I come back and say, do you want to?
No, we're not doing that.
Number of documents, do you want to and you can sort of drill through that. Never There might be a shorter it's supposed to list every document on that search. It almost becomes sort of a drill document, but it's based off of that.
Actually, the list you just enunciated sounds to me like a list of parameters. Do you care when? Do you care how big it is?
Right.
Or metadata parameters?
The way, well, if you think about how Google used to work a couple of years ago, you could search on something and here's
If it weren't accessible, I would go to the straight to files. But
At first,
sorting isn't a file
concept
requirement.
makes sense, whether it's visual or auditory, struck me as a good idea. Is the file you are looking for, how old is the file? As opposed to, yes, I think so. Or say,
Hey folks, just want to do a quick check. Is there any group who's sort of stuck? Oh, I see hands, I see hands. Don't be afeared.
I think this is sort of going in the right direction. You have to make it useful for people. No disability. I'm assuming they were retrofitting it.
It's kind of a like this Robin out there to figure out what do we need to make the features that we requested more accessible.
Right.
So one of the things I heard was we don't show a list of 500 items. Keep it a list of maybe 10 and then have a space.
I mean, let's just do that. I like the files. Maybe instead of extra
Without setting it
yeah. Yeah. I like that. Right, we don't want to read anymore either, you know, so we just want to.
Folks, we're going to wrap up in 5 minutes. The question I have is, with the concepts you have so far, are there 2 to 3 groups who'd like to share your masterpiece? Any groups? Raise your hand. You still got 5 minutes to polish it up, but any groups?
Alternatively, we can have people maybe talk about 1 or 2 things about their design that they'd like to highlight. Maybe just talk about some ideas. So take your time, but we can revisit afterwards.
Yeah, so 5 minutes.
The answers for the rest of that can't talk.
Above that, that's the icon. The icon here is but it's also, let's say, also a file, trees.
Allow you to
I don't care if it does. It's not here on the link.
Okay, so just the stage button with a microphone.
Well, if you think about, imagine all of these files were physical. Going in, you go to the library. How would you ask? How would you ask for that picture of the Sears Tower? You need to know the picture. You need to know what it's of. You're probably the, I know. I was gonna say you're probably the only person who actually calls us the Sears Tower. So tonight is the
Related to the
right. You got it.
So if you look like you gotta know how to organize.
Yeah. And you asked them, I'm looking for this book by and they go on and walk to the staff. So they know, they're smart enough to know, oh, well, that's going on the picture section. That's research, but it knows just shelved in you know what? Share. Because you don't have to assume technology. You know in your brain. What? Think about like file storage systems you talk about. Nope. Go in there just randomly poke around.
So are we saying that the challenge is not accessibility?
Well, it's been built.
And that's basically the search engine. Okay. So you start it out, and you give it something that's along your it can go and find some files that match.
They're able to read the table too.
Right, you're correct. Isn't Siri pretty close to that?
Yeah.
And they can read it across.
Isn't Siri pretty close to that?
Yeah, so what does the know?
All right, let's wrap it up.
One more minute.
One more minute. We'll get covered so much in 1
Voice
minute.
recognition.
Yeah, I can do a lot. All right. So let's come back together. I'll tell you what. I'm not going to put any one group on the spot, but let's just go around the room for a second and kind of talk about some of the things that we were thinking about, some of the challenges that we were facing. This is really bright. I'm nowhere near the microphone either. I have no idea if this is actually picking up on this thing, but just in case.
I think you got to have it with you.
All right. So yeah, let's just go around the room real quick and talk a little bit about, some of the challenges that we were facing, some of the ideas that we had. So, anyone? Don't make me point. Work with me, people. Back there.
Well, we got stuck thinking about today's technology and navigating lists and how awful lists would be
to have to navigate
Okay, yeah.
through a screen reader. Like think about going through your Dropbox with a screen reader.
Yeah, and what do you think, I mean, what do you think would be some of the challenges around that kind of a user, for that user?
The quantity. I mean, I've
quantity?
got like 1 million files on Dropbox.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah.
Talk about really long file names. Like you have like IMG, long list of letters and numbers, and how that can be confusing. That's
Sure.
in your file.
Right, yeah, if you have to hear that audibly, what is that experience going to be like, right?
Well, and we also talked about that usually it's more of like a table where it's not just the file name, it also gives you the date and the file type and other metadata,
Right.
and so it's in a table, so you get, the first time it goes through and it says file, date, type, tags, and then it starts giving you this information, and so you mentally kind of have to almost build that table in order to follow what's going on as it says doc1.doc, document, August 21st, 2014, and you're like, wait, what's going on?
Right,
And that must
but
be-
screen readers associate it. They do.
They do actually.
They
But
associate it. So
What do you mean by
that
associated?
doesn't, they associate the headers with the content.
So it would say file name,
Yeah.
doc,
I can show you
file,
I can show you an example of that.
Yeah, so don't worry about
date.
it. Tables are.
and it would
Worry
be-
about it, but
then,
yeah.
well, then is that also it's repeating that same thing every
Exactly. You
line.
have to use headers though. That's the thing.
That's the trick. And actually, I'll talk a little bit in a second about semantics, like the importance of using semantics in web design. Semantic markup, that is to say. Anyone else? Anyone else have some interesting thoughts, challenges, something they just felt really awesome that they like an idea? Yeah.
I think it might be off the wall, but don't we have to, right up front, know what kind of a disability they have so we can present the thing for them?
That's a great question.
Or do we have to present, oh, okay, I'll stop there.
No, continue. I want to hear it. I want to hear it. That's a great point.
I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we touched on that as well.
Yeah.
And immediately, as an old-timey programmer, I went, whoa, parallel maintenance.
Right? And you start to think about that. It's like, because one of the things that actually happens, I'm going to just run with this for a second, right? It's like, as soon as somebody starts thinking about, you need to have a website that is ADA compliant. And so many people will say, well, couldn't we just make an accessible version of the site? To which I respond, like, okay, you get to maintain it, right? So that's an interesting point. And actually, just to kind of carry through with that idea, because this is an interesting challenge, and Dennis, you can stop me if I'm stepping on the end of your presentation here.
But go with it.
All right. So let's think of a world where, as a web developer, I want to know if somebody has a disability when they visit my site so I can give them the best possible experience in the world. I want to be able to design to tailor for that. Well, on the flip side of that, so we can have technology in the browser that says, oh, you have a screen reader active. Great. I can actually make sure that I'm optimizing this for screen reader behavior. But think about that for a second. If you're somebody who has a disability, do you necessarily want to be broadcasting that information to the world? So this is one of the challenges that we face when we start thinking about accessible design, is that we're in this kind of a catch-22. We were talking about this earlier. I talked to several groups about this, actually. Is that, we want to be able to optimize for everyone. But if we did that, we'd probably have 7-some-odd billion different designs. And the truth of the matter is that even if we start thinking about trying to identify a disability that a person may have, is that something that is that a path that we necessarily want to go down? Did anyone else? Oh, yeah.
How far away are we from the world we're in today, where the audio, when you dial a phone number, says, if you want Spanish, press 2?
And that's an interesting point, right? And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's on the flip
There was a day
side,
when
right?
I think people would hesitate to say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't speak English well enough, I'll hit 2 and listen to Spanish. But now, it's not considered a disability of any kind.
And it's actually interesting, because internationalization kind of tends to fall under the purview of inclusive design, right? Because language is in itself the language that you speak. If you speak a language that is not the primary language of the interface that you're interacting with, that does inhibit your ability to understand. To that point, customization, it kind of bridges that gap between, providing information, self-identifying. How many of you didn't raise your hand when you were asked if you used assistive technology? You didn't think you had a disability. I don't. But I wear glasses, and it's true. I cannot drive without these things. I can't even walk around without these things. I stopped being able to see the big E a long time ago. Anyone else? Any other ideas? Before we kind of continue. Yeah.
I thought about using more icons, and specifically, like we have international road signs, have an international type of thing. This icon means everything in every language.
Yeah, it's a floppy disk.
People can, pardon?
It's a floppy disk.
Yeah.
Floppy disk to save.
Except if you're 12, you don't know what a floppy disk is.
But you still know it means save because you see it every time you use Word, right?
It is so funny to me that there's a whole generation of people that have no idea what that means.
Other thing that we're talking about is that tree view that almost you see almost everywhere, and how it could be challenging if someone's tricky, because it's so small.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Think about that.
And solve this problem, we can implement magnifier link in the website.
Or
Make the zoom in the website.
It's a great idea. I'm pointing at all of you. You're coming up with fantastic ideas here. Yeah.
I got a thoughts on what I did before because I don't know where a floppy disk would fit in with my thoughts.
I'm so sorry.
I think I had 12 inch at one time. I know I had 8 inch. Anyhow.
I remember the 8 inches. Big elephant on it.
Okay, with a screen reader, with a mouse, an icon instead of writing, it can be done in all languages, and it could be helpful for people that really can't read real well. So if we can elaborate more with or use icons more, I think that could help navigate through rather than just have.
Absolutely, yeah. See, in the ideas that you're coming up with, this is part of what thinking about inclusive design is. And I said this to several groups, but I'll say it kind of to everyone now. So, is that there are certainly ways to accomplish things out there, right? But part of what we're trying to accomplish here is not necessarily think about the same standards again and again and again, but start challenging ourselves to think about what kinds of opportunities we can provide to our users to access the technology that we're creating. And I think that what we live in a day and age where the things that we can do with tech is really fast. I mean, off the top of your head, what do you think is what do you think would be probably the most intuitive, easy way to interact with something? Just anything. Speech, right? We do it to each other. Now, there are those of us certainly that don't have the ability to speak, and those people have to find other ways to be able to speak. As a matter of fact, if you look at me right now, what am I doing with my hands as I am talking to you? I suddenly became very self-aware of that as I was talking. But speech is not just about vocalization, though. And I think this is actually something to think about, just kind of take with you before I go into a demo, is that as human beings, we don't even use one method of communication in our daily lives. So it's not just about solving specific use cases. Again, stop me in that. But thinking about the different ways that people can potentially interact with things in the world. So I'll leave you with that. Let's take a look at an actual real-world example of the kind of solution that we were talking about designing. Encrypted Cloud, I'm not picking on them for any reason. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be pretty fair here, because I'm going to show you some things that work well and some things that don't. So I'm going to start off by thinking about, okay, if I'm somebody who's coming to this website, if I'm using the mouse, I can get around pretty well. We have some visual hover states. I apologize. Actually, no, I'm not going to apologize. It's a perfect example. Where, as I'm hovering over these rows, you see where my mouse pointer is. You can't see that hover state, can you? No. Now, I can on my screen. I'm one of those weird people that has tons of extra cones in my eyes. I forgot the name of this. But, that's not the common case. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people that actually can't see this level of contrast, even if it isn't blown out on a projector screen. So contrast becomes a very important thing to think about when we're thinking about our designs. Colors become a very important thing to think about. If you actually think about it, 7% of the male population is colorblind. Most prevalently red-green, which means they either can't see the reds or the greens, differentiating those colors. 7%. I have a coworker who every time he does a diagram, I have to ask him what the different shades of green it means, and he's like, what do you mean? But think about that. If you're actually having those subtleties and variation in color, one on top of each other, even if they're different colors, but they're very close in contrast, they have a very low contrast ratio. Contrast ratio, look it up. There's actually tools out there on the web that you can actually compare them. Photoshop has some stuff built in as well. Let's actually, so moving around on the mouse, there's a lot that I can actually do here. The buttons are a pretty decent size, so I can actually have a decent hitbox. That's good, right? And we're using some iconography, and I love this. Even though we're using iconography, they thought about the idea of actually including a text description, just in case somebody might not necessarily know what that icon is. But let's actually try then to take away the mouse. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to just start off. Most web browsers, you have to turn this feature on. By default, most web browsers will actually only hit form fields. You have to turn it on to actually hit everything else. But it doesn't hit everything on the page. It's only going to hit things that are considered focusable, and they're in the tab order on a web page. So if we start actually going around, so I'm kind of like, well, I guess I'm up there in the top. All right. And then I tab again. I don't know where I am right now. Maybe if I tap, no, nothing. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, we're back. We're back. This is good. All right, so I'm going to keep going. What? Why did I go? How did I get over there? Well, okay, I guess I'm over there now. That's fine. I can get to all these things. That's great. All right, okay. I guess I'm down on a. I can't even see that. I can barely see it over here. I don't know where I am again. That's weird. Those are like the same buttons. They have the same styles. I'm in a form. All right, I know how to search. That's great. And okay, I can actually press that search, and I'm back over there again. That's kind of weird. What if I actually did this? Okay, so I can kind of get in there, but I can't get to those other buttons in the drop down, and I guess and now this thing is stuck in front of my. I can't even see that first thing anymore. Well, maybe if I go up to this thing and. All right, okay, I escaped out of it. That's not bad. All right, that's okay. I can get into these, and I can actually. How do I share? There's no. I knew there was some share buttons. Like, how do I? If I mouse this, maybe if I clicked on this and oh, that just opened it up. How do I? Oh, maybe I'm in here now. Okay, so. Okay, I guess I can print it, and what's this? I guess I'm downloading it. Yeah, okay, but I still can't share. Now I got all this stuff all over the place. I can't even. How do I get out of this? There we go. All right, I'm back at the top of the page again. Well, I have to go back through all that content again now. So that's kind of weird, right? Like it's a little bit of a jarring. This beautiful interface. It did some really nice things. But then I move the mouse, and suddenly it's kind of like, well, how do I get it? Okay, maybe, but I was still able to find things, right? Okay, I wasn't able to share any documents. Sharing is actually done by kind of clicking over here, actually, and it isn't working very well right now. But let me try something here. Let me see if I can actually get a little bit more information. I'm going to turn this on. So that was really fast, by the way. You actually find that a lot of people who use screen readers have it turned like super fast. This is actually slow. This is slow by most users' definition. I'm going to go ahead in here and just quickly turn this down a little bit. Let's bring this down to about 50.
Rate 54, the best way to predict. Rate 50, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. System preferences, Safari.
You get used to it, actually. But I actually had an old boss of mine who was blind since birth. I was like, that's not even English. You're not even. It was funny. All right, so let's try this out.
All right,
that's not too bad. All right, this is pretty good. Okay.
Link button. Link.
Oh, it said it changed what it said about that field.
Link.
Link? Okay. All right. If you say so.
Link. Home.
Okay. Home. Okay. I'm gonna go home. All right. That's good.
Link.
All right. I don't know what that is. I'm just gonna keep my eyes closed on this one. I don't even know what that.
Link.
Oh, Cyril, you're not helping me here.
This is link.
Okay, that's great. I know I was there. I can't remember what that is. That's great.
Create folder button.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Now I know where I am. Great. I can create a folder.
No
That's
file selected. File upload button.
All right. Okay. I'm uploading a file. Okay. That's not too
Text
bad.
to search. Edit text.
Oh, that's not too bad. That's pretty good.
Button. Text to search. Edit button.
But all right.
Enter marking button.
Well, okay. I have a button apparently. I'm a button now.
On one case, it's
inside of HTML content. To click this button, press Control Option Space.
All right. I'll bite.
Press Enter marking button.
Okay. All right. But what did that do? Like, where am I? Am I on the button again? Do I click it again, or well, here? Let me.
Visit link. Enter marking.
Oh, that's great. I have a link too.
Visit link. Add cloud provider.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good. Well, all right. Let's
link.
Let's see what else.
Table 4 columns. 8 rows.
Oh, so that's interesting.
Link. Getting started.pdf. Table 4 columns. 8 rows.
Now I know that I'm in a table, so I'm going to do something here. I'm going to switch over.
Quick tab off. Quick tab on.
I'm going to turn on Quick Now so I can use the arrow keys to kind of navigate around
Column.
here.
File. Clickable column 2 of 4.
Oh, okay.
Size. 243.3 KB. Clickable column 3 of 4. Modified. A year ago. Clickable column 4 of 4.
That's pretty good. All right, that's not bad. Nice table there. Nice table.
Row 5 of name. Visited link. Photos. Column. Submission. Link. Kind. Size.
Still can't
Clickable
share
column 3 of
anything
4.
though. And
Modified. A year ago. Clickable
well,
column 4 of 4.
I think you
Voiceover
get the
off.
point. So, what do you think, right? If you were a user going through that interface, and that was how you were perceiving the interface, how do you think that would actually feel? Would it feel like a polished UI? Would that be something that you would share? Is that easy? No.
Absolutely.
Well, how did you, sometimes, it struck me that sometimes it would say it was a link, and other times it would say what the link was.
Right.
Were you controlling that with keys, or how?
So, interestingly enough, this is where semantics come into play, right? I mentioned semantic markup. This is my advice to you all when it comes to web accessibility. You use the markup to specification, you can get 90% of the way there. And the reason why it's not working for some of the buttons, it's generally not working for the buttons that just have icons.
Yeah, exactly.
Icons aren't interpreted by screen readers because they aren't normal characters. They're special characters. And the screen reader doesn't read special characters. So
even standards like that little magnifying glass, that's a very common icon.
Right, it is. It's an extremely common icon that doesn't have a textual meaning. So this is where we actually...
It doesn't have a nasty value that thing recognizes.
It doesn't. And you'll actually find from font file to font file, if you're going to use Font Awesome, it's going to use a different Unicode character than another font file. Now, we could live in a world where we standardize that, and that would actually be really great, right? If we had a standardization of what these fonts were. But we don't live in that world yet. But here's the thing, is that there are tools, and again, Dennis is going to talk a little bit more about this when he finishes up after I'm done with my
Not anymore. No.
But there are tools available to us in web accessibility, in mobile, in even in desktop computing, where we can actually draw on things that are in the specification. Things like, spoilers, ARIA, which is a part of the HTML specification that adds the semantics to your markup where there are gaps. So use a button, right? Like they did a great job. They used actual real buttons instead of making a clickable div because it was easier. So it actually read as something I could interact with. But then it's going the extra measure and saying, okay, well, how do I make sure that the information about this button is being conveyed? And they used title attributes. But the thing is that title attributes aren't universally interpreted. But things like the alt attribute or on images, or an aria-label attribute that specifies the text that you want to be read aloud, those things will. I'm not going to go too deep into ARIA now, and I don't think Dennis is going to have time to either, but I would strongly encourage you all to take some time to kind of look at these specifications and start to see the kind of groovy things that they add. Even if you're not an HTML guru, just going through the list, and we can post this actually, if you don't, I don't know if you have it in the link handy, but
we can post.
But just to look at some of the things that it defines, because what it starts to do is it actually starts to define some really interesting states, and for those of you that are also web developers in the room, it really starts to allow you to do some awesome things with adding some of the semantic information. Hint, they're selectors. CSS selectors, these attributes. So think about that. All right. So any questions before I hand this back to Dennis?
Yeah. One thing you mentioned, people that are colorblind, but there's also a mix of colors that can be next to each other that are different colors, but the people see them as one.
That's correct. Yeah, that is like the quintessential thing. So even it might look different for us, it won't necessarily for others. Yeah. All right. So
we're going to swap here. First off, give Elizabeth and Andrew a round of applause. Like I think I had already said, I started this so I could go to meetups where they're talking about accessibility. So, boom, done. I'll just sit in the back and watch Andrew and Elizabeth and other fine experts speak. How many... So basically what I'm going to do now is sort of summarize what we've talked about. How many UX folks do we have here tonight? Raise your hands. Okay. So first off, thank you. So first off, UX folks. And actually this goes for visual designers as well. Billy Gregory, who runs the Meetup in Toronto, posted this on Twitter about a month or so ago, and it took off because it's so true. Again, inclusive design. UX not for some, but for all. Otherwise, it what?
Sucks.
I was hoping I'd get you all to say sucks tonight. So, progressive enhancement. It's a perfect approach to building websites. Forgive the XHTML. This is obviously a dated Lego set here. But really, this is the building blocks. If you want to build an accessible website, use this approach. The way I look at progressive enhancement, it's very much like an escalator. So think about an escalator. What does it do? Moves people. It's a feature. What happens if it breaks?
You have to walk.
You could still get to where you're going. You could still do what you need to do. It just won't take you there. Unlike these folks who decided that they can't get anywhere without it taking them there. So, just so you know, in researching this, this is like such a hot video, a viral video. Just look up escalator stops. It's like #1. So, okay, low-hanging fruit. Page headings, semantic order. Your headings. I know where I work. Content's riddled with H1, H3, H2, H4, H3, H2, H. No. That's a nightmare for someone who's using a screen reader, who's trying to navigate your content. Make sure it's in semantic order. Make sure you have an H1 to start with.
And only one.
And only one. I know the specifications say, sure, now you can have one in each section and stuff. Even the SEO folks will tell you, stick with one. Yes?
Only one is what we always said, but I listened to a video by, what's his name? The guy that was with Google.
Matt Cutts?
And he mentioned that you can use an additional H1 if you have a total change in the content.
And from a search engine optimization, that may be the case. For an accessibility standpoint, no. It actually throws the user off if they're dependent on that. Alternative text. Just a little, alternative text is like everyone, whenever you think about low-hanging fruit for accessibility, first thing about, we'll just put alt tags on, alt attributes. There's no such thing as an alt tag.
But they do say alt tag.
I know.
They do. We all do.
I know we all do.
I just tags too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Think about the context of the image. Okay? If it's decorative, every image, every inline image element should have an alt attribute. The value of that alt attribute depends on the context. If it's design, you don't need to tell the user that it's an upper right-hand curved corner. Okay? Just leave it blank. Alt equals blank. It will not be read by the screen reader. Okay? If it's content, you need to describe what that content is. If it has text on it, you need to communicate the same message that the text is communicating. Ads, make sure that, most ads have text on it. Make sure that you're communicating the same message. Color contrast. How many of you can read this? Raise your hand. Most of you don't have glasses and you're young and I'm envious. This would fail compliance. Okay? Sole meaning. See, is that in the right? Let me think here.
Yeah, you can't use colors as signifiers.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I meant.
Just sole signifier.
Yes. Make sure that you have multiple ways of explaining something. Don't just use color. Form fields. I can't tell you how many times I run across form fields that would rather use placeholders than field labels.
Placeholders don't count.
Exactly. And in fact, except for HTML5, they don't work across browsers. So make sure you have proper form labels. Focus indicator, what you were mentioning before. Most designers, let's take that off. It looks ugly. Some people are dependent on it. Design it. Design it into the design. Okay? Descriptive link text. How many times, what Andrew was doing, tabbing through all the focusable elements, so form fields and links, if you hit every link on some sites, all you'll hear is, click here, book now, over and over again. It gives you no context on what that is. In the WordPress world that I dabble with, a lot of times what we'll do is say, read more, and then about whatever it is, we'll just shove that off the screen. Display, read more, but the screen reader will read what that context is. Okay? Table header, and this should be data relationships, not date. I knew I was good. I was waiting for the typo. I knew it was there somewhere. By default, as long as you use your TH elements and your TD elements properly, you're good. It's when you start spanning rows and columns, start nesting tables, please don't do that, then you'll run into issues. But there's ways to get around it. You can associate with your scope equals col or row. You can do ID header pairs. You can search for that on Google and you'll find that information. And then proximity. Whenever I think of this, I think of Derek Featherstone. He has a great presentation where he does a demonstration. Basically, the whole idea of having a form label to the left and the form field to the right, that means you're having to go back and forth horizontally. If you have it stacked, like we see on many mobile apps, it's much easier to create that relationship visually. ARIA, to your point. First rule, don't use it. It's easy enough. Which actually, I guess, by just the black and white of it, I counter what you said. But
no, you don't actually, and I'll explain.
Right.
Because your second point actually goes where I get.
Exactly. Aria's hot. It's sexy. Let's all put it on. I am on a project to make things more accessible, and I saw the requirements document. And for every link on a page, it said role equals link. Links are already links. Why do we have to say role equals link? You don't need it. You don't need, if you have a div role equals button, just make it a button. We have an element for that. Use the native element. Okay? Don't duplicate. Give it the semantic meaning that we have holistically. If you need to supplement, then use ARIA. Okay? Accessibility compliance. If you're trying to be compliant with either 508 With WCAG, making it compliant does not make it usable or give it a great experience. It just makes it compliant. Bake in the user experience for the person using the screen reader or the person who's just using the keyboard. Okay? I love this quote. For people without disabilities, technology makes things convenient. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible. Remember that each and every day when you're designing or coding your sites. Okay, upcoming. For our meetup, we have the Global Accessibility Awareness Day celebration, which is next Thursday. It is at, I believe it's at Merchandise Mart. We have it on our website. Basically, at Razorfish, we're going to be discussing assistive technology. We're going to have some demos. If you enjoyed the screen reader demo, we're going to have much more to add on to that. And additionally, what was just announced today, so I had to throw it out here, Inclusive Design 24 is a series of 1-hour webinars during a 24-hour period. It's online, it's free. It's recorded. You can see last year's. Sign up and you'll be able to watch this year's. And with that, this is where the slides are from this presentation. Visit our website to learn about future meetups. And are there any questions? Yes?
Do you see accessibility being a must-have in 2 or 3 years the way responsive design is today?
My opinion, yes.
Actually, do I think that it's going to be a necessity? I think it was a necessity 10 years ago.
Oh, I agree. I'm talking about the market.
No, but here's the thing. If I may.
As long as you don't tear
When we think about responsive designs, we tend to think about responsive designs in terms of adapting to a user's form factor, right? But if you really start to think about it, isn't what we're talking about essentially fundamentally part of our good responsive design? Your design is responding to the way that the user is going to interact with that technology. Now, there are limitations to this. We don't actually have media queries that we can use to say, I have a screen reader on. But when we start to think about the different ways that people can potentially interact with the technology, so we've talked about using keyboards. We didn't really go into mobile devices. How many people here have either an Android or an iOS device? Why do I even ask that question, right?
Yeah.
For iOS users, there's a feature, it's the same feature that was on the Mac. It's called VoiceOver. For Android, it's called TalkBack. You can actually go to apple.com/accessibility or google.com/accessibility for a little bit more information on how to enable those features. It's actually really simple. You can do it with 3 clicks on the Android, and there's 3 or 4 actions you have to take on iOS to get it set up. But if you turn these on and just start playing around and see how it changes the way that your form behaves, it's a really fascinating way to think about how people are actually using that same mobile device in different ways. So to answer your question succinctly, which I'm not good at, obviously, when you think about responsiveness, really the fundamental thing you're trying to do is actually respond to the form factor. That should include the different types of assistive technology, or even the different ways that people would actually interact. And it's especially when your responsiveness actually carries us immediately over into when people are zooming in to interfaces as well.
I'd like to add to that. Legal action is a huge motivator. I don't know if you all remember 2008, Target got sued. Basically, they didn't react to the complaints of their blind customers. So the National Federation of the Blind came in and they sued them for $10 million.
Successfully. Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Anybody who wants to make any kind of product for any government entity, I don't care what government, it's got to be 508 compliant.
508 compliant.
And it's easy to do. They just gave us the tips, you know.
As I mentioned, I work for an airline. The airline industry in the United States is mandated to be compliant. There are fines for not being compliant.
Per day.
Per day, per instance. Oh, can it add up? I predict, like Jerry Taft doing the weather here in Chicago, that all e-commerce websites will be mandated within 5 years.
The precedent is already set.
Right. So it's not legal action, it's legal mandates, and they're coming.
Just as a kind of an aside note, you talked about Target. Can anybody guess who is one of the leaders in accessibility right now? It would be Target.
We were so impressed. Like I said, I went to CSUN earlier this year. It's a conference for accessibility, and Target presented several presentations, and everyone was just wowed, simply wowed, because they not only made their site more accessible, but they've adopted the culture of accessibility throughout.
And just something I wanted to add, we're talking here about, legal action and those sorts of things, but sometimes this accessibility can be good business, and, we don't have to raise our hands, but think about these things. How many people have drag their suitcase over those curb cuts? How many people are sitting in a restaurant that's very noisy and you want to watch the game and you're reading the text so you can know what's going on? Now that was all accessibility stuff, and now it's common things that we use every day. There's a company, I don't know if anybody's familiar with audible.com. They sell audiobooks. They're an Amazon company. I joined the company a long time ago, and I also belong to a mailing list for some screen reader users. I started seeing a lot of questions. People were asking, when you go to the audible.com site, how do you, what does this happen? How do you do that? How do you download a book? Well, blind people found out about audible.com. It was to their prayers, because they would have to wait months to get a bestseller on books on tape when they could get it at Audible on the same day that the hardback book is released. So all of a sudden Audible had all of these blind users on their site, all of these people who are buying their audiobooks, and they actually had to go through and change their website, and they made their website accessible in order to take advantage of that business. So that is one of the benefits of having an accessible site. You can't actually pick up new business. A lot of people kind of think, it's expensive, and what really is the market for?
I heard a stat, the population of China equates to people with disabilities worldwide.
It's 1/5 of the world's population, yes, internationally.
Also, the baby boomers are getting older.
They are.
One of the disabilities that they're going to have is motor arthritis.
The propensity for somebody to develop a disability after the age of 65 increases dramatically. And like I said, 20% of the population has some sort of disability. And here's the fun fact. Like those folks in the room with the glasses, that doesn't include people who don't self-identify as having a disability. So this ranges, if you want a little bit more of a statistic, 12.3% of the U.S. population's 2010 census had what's considered to be a severe disability. Can't perform activities every day without some form of assistance. So 12.3% of the population. I checked in on this about a year ago, and there are companies that are still doing this. I know of companies that still have IE8 in their support matrix. Less than 7% of the internet using population uses IE8 people, and yet we're designing for them, but not for the 12.3%. Right? It's not that simple, I know. It's kind of watering down numbers, but when you start to think about this, if you really need to make a business case for this, $120 billion of untapped spending power of heads of households that have a disability. That's a lot of money! And it's 1/5 of the population of the money you're saying, I don't really want your money. I don't know. If I was in charge of a company, I'd be like, why are you not letting 5% of our 20% of our population, our customer base, buy our product? That's money we're not getting. So, a lot of people tend to think about accessibility as kind of like this thing that I can do later. And really, it's actually kind of an awesome thing to do now. There's this guy we know. He's this great guy. He used to work for the BBC. His name's Jonathan Hassel. And we were talking. Dennis and I both met with him independently a while back.
he was doing kind of like a book tour. He wrote this book. It's not on sale in the U.S., unfortunately. Not yet. So, but he was talking, and he brought up this really cool example, and I really wanted to share this with you folks. So, is there a marker? There's a marker. Great. Okay. Let me get the chart. So this right here is, let's see, time, and this is benefit. Okay. So you're a company that has a product. You're going to try to make it accessible. If you do it up here, you're the first one to do it. The amount of benefit that you get for doing that is huge. Because you're the first, right? You get the PR, you get ahead of the market, you get to actually do some innovation and start actually getting ahead of it. So you might even help set regulatory standards that actually impact your competitors. All right, you wait a little bit. You do it a little bit later. Okay, you're here. Now what you're doing is you're saying, okay, you're still getting some benefit, you're still looking good. Maybe you're not innovating as much, so you don't get that press, but you're still getting ahead of most of your competitors, and you're getting ahead of the market. All right, we get down here now. Now we're getting into regulation has been passed, you're mandated. It's a little bit of a panic time, but you know what? You can scramble. You've lost the PR benefit, but at least you're not getting sued. Then you get sued, right? Here's the fun thing about this graph. The level of effort is constant. It doesn't get any harder or easier to do accessibility over time. But the sooner that you incorporate these ideas into your process, the sooner you start thinking about this, not only are you reaching more of your customer base, but you're actually reaping more of the benefit for yourself as an individual in the marketplace, but also for the company that you're working for, or for your clients, depending on how your business model works. So, again, it's kind of one of those things where it's like the choice is ultimately up to you, but this kind of stuff is important to a lot of people. It's important to so many people. It's important to 20% of the population. It's important to the people that are reaching the age of 65. It's important to those of us that drive cars and can't necessarily interact with their phones. It's important for those of us that sometimes are too tired to actually read something. Or sometimes we're getting distracted by our daily lives and the way that we actually work with the technology. We don't want to make mistakes. Accessibility isn't about people with disabilities. Inclusive design, we use that term because it is inclusive. It's all incorporated. So this kind of stuff, I mean, obviously exciting. I mean, boring, whatever. No, I mean, this is really exciting and cool stuff. It's kind of, you know, the future is, they're not even talking about the future, it's the now. It's the opportunity to start incorporating these ideas into what we're doing and not only improve the way that we think about technology for the people that we're making technology for, but ultimately for ourselves.
Thank you.
I just came up with a new nickname for Andrew. I'm now calling him Reverend.
Any other questions after that? Any other questions? Yes?
Are there any automatic analytic tools out there for assessing your own products?
Absolutely. So the most readily available tool is a site called wedaim.org, and they have a tool called Wave. They actually have this tool. You can insert markup and have it validate. It also can parse your website, so you can provide it as it's a Firefox plugin that you can use to evaluate the accessibility of your site. And what it'll do is it'll look at things that it can measure. Things like heading order, contrast ratios. It will look at the proper use of ARIA. So as Dennis mentioned earlier, it is possible to overuse ARIA. As a matter of fact, it's tempting to overuse ARIA, especially when you find it's like, wow, this stuff's pretty cool. You don't want to do that. You know, use semantics first, then fill in. It'll tell you. So that'll actually be it's a useful tool to be able to say, where are some problem areas on my website? What are some things that I can do right now to take care of some of those low-hanging fruits immediately? Beyond Wave, there's also there's a Chrome accessibility, web developer accessibility toolkit that also has some analytic tools in it that you can run some audits on your site. Finally, there are paid options. There are two companies that I'm going to mention now for those of you that are actually looking to maybe get some accessibility consulting. I am a member nor a stockholder of either of these, so this is completely just not, you know. The first is a company called the Paciello Group. They're an excellent resource. Their website is actually a great source of information. They have a lot of great blog posts.
The other is a company called SSB BART. SSB is expensive, but they are extremely talented. And they actually have their own tool that they developed called AMP, which will not only create, give you automated validation tools, but also help you create a database of test cases for your QA team. I will say that these are great solutions. And actually, they're really great solutions to look for consultants when you reach that point in your organization where you're trying to get over the hump, or you're really looking for like something to, so you really need like somebody to drive this forward. For every other solution, start at the beginning and just start with, can I tab through my website? It's one of the most easy things, most readily available things that any of us can do. And believe me when I say that actually being able to get to every part of the interface, it does what Dennis was talking about, that escalator situation. If somebody can reach the content, then at least initially they can figure it out. And accessibility, it's not a state, right? It's not I'm accessible or I'm not. It's a spectrum. And having a little bit of accessibility is better than having no accessibility at all. So don't be afraid to dive in and at least try something. And I said this to several groups around the room, so walking around the room. It's not necessarily about following exactly what the rest of us have done. Try something different. It might work. It might not. It probably won't. You'll fail a lot. Trust me.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.